Thank you so much for joining us today in our presentation, or my presentation of the end of the year STAR data report for Albertville Intermediate School. I'm Katie Tyner, and this is a course requirement for EFD 620, Measurement and Evaluation in Education. So first off, let's give you some demographics about Albertville Intermediate School. Currently in enrollment, we have about 914 students, both traditional and virtual, but with the coming school year, virtual will not be an option for 5th and 6th grade, but this is the data report for the this past school year. Student demographics include about 70% white, 20% Hispanic, and 10% other. And we have about a 25% population of English language learners. So the STAR assessment is given 3 times a year. It's given in at the beginning of school. As soon as the students get to school, it's one of the very first things that they do within the first few weeks of school. It's given again at Christmas and then again in April. And so this gives us 3 data points that we can look at to gauge student growth and also their overall ZPD. Next, we use the data throughout the school year for many things, because with STAR, you can look at different skills, specific skills that students need to work on. And so this is a great planning tool for our teachers and other things that we use them for. And so what we are going to look at today is the skill score for one particular class in 6th grade and look at their overall growth for this school year. So to give you an idea of what skill score actually means, it is useful for comparing student performance over time and across grades. So we could look at their skill score from 5th grade and how it compares to 6th grade. And then when they continue on to 7th grade, they can use that data as well. A skill score is calculated based on the difficulty of questions that they get on the STAR assessment and the number of correct responses that they have. Because of the same range that's used for all students, skill score can be used to compare student performance across the grade level. STAR reading is scaled scores between a 0 and 1400, and it's all norm reference scores are derived from the skill score. So let's look at a STAR reading scaled score report. So I have here 2 students, and the first thing that you probably notice is that there are some colored dots on this chart. So down at the bottom, it actually tells you what each color means. So the student that you see to my left is all 3 of their data points is at or above benchmark, and then the student directly below me, they have 1 of each color. So they have 1 for intervention, 1 for urgent intervention, and then they go back up to at or above benchmark. So as you can see, each one represents a different date in which a student was tested with the STAR reading. Like I said before, once at the beginning of the school year, again at winter break or right before winter break, and then again in April. The key at the bottom tells you the corresponding colors, which we've already covered. And so the benchmark that you see from the first student is established before the students even test, and it's established by our district. In this case, the student did not trend upwards, but they were still high enough. They had a high enough skill score to put them in the green, because you can see at the beginning of the year, they started around 750, and then right before winter break, they went down to about 650. But then by the end of the year, they went back up again into the 700s. And so this student will not have any foreseeable issues as they continue on into 7th grade, because they are meeting that benchmark. The second student has a more variety of data points. At the beginning of the year, they tested in the intervention area, and this just means for us as teachers that we really pay attention to these students. They get one-on-one instruction. They get really specific skills, small groups, this sort of thing. So this gives us a good idea of our kids who we need to get on the path to growth. Now, they went down again, like I said before, the one before winter break in the urgent intervention. And you can see that the number is anywhere between 200 and 300. So this is a little bit of a concern that they go from intervention down to urgent intervention, but it is not impossible to get the child or the student to be successful. So we look at data points like this to also really hone in that extra intervention, small group, and that sort of thing. But urgent intervention students would also possibly maybe be our TI students, especially if they are consistently testing in the urgent intervention. They might be our EL students. In the case of this student, maybe he was having a bad day and just didn't do very well on the test that day. And because you can see in the third data point, they go really, really high. So it could be in any number of different things. So, like I said, we can look at this in from two different directions. One, there could have been some factors involved in the performance, because this is a very interesting school year, to say the least, with everything going on with the global pandemic. And so, of course, we were expecting some discrepancies. And so it's not uncommon to see this type of result at this point in the school year, especially for the school year. But we can also look at this from another standpoint and say they had spectacular growth by the end of the year. So either way, we can look at this with two different points of view. Now, this third student that I want to show you, this third student that I would like to show you is a little bit different. As you can see, they have 3 data points that are all yellow in the intervention area, but you can also see the trend upward. So they started off at the beginning of the school year between 440 and 460, and by the end of the year, they had brought up their scale score over 100 points. So we are seeing an upward trend in this area, or in this particular student and others. This data is used to give more one-on-one instruction and intervention to this particular student, so we can better gauge what skills and things need to be talked about in class. This data is very important to continue to analyze so we can see the areas that students need more help. This is also another plus to being tested 3 times a year. And we want all of our students, obviously, to show growth over the year, no matter how small the numbers seem to be, as long as they are trending upwards. So lastly, I want to point out some things with the STAR report for the year are these 2 pieces of data that we use the most often. So if you look at the district benchmark graph, okay, so this is for the student from the last slide, so the one that had 3 yellow data points. With the data that comes from the STAR assessment, several other data points that are also very beneficial to our reading teachers. First of all is their ZPD, or zone of proximal development, that you can see down here at the bottom. So this would be the end of the school year. This student had a ZPD between 3.4 and 5.3. So this is used basically for students to choose an AR book to where they know that if it's within this range, that student should be successful with it. But also we look at these numbers and we say, okay, so for the 6th grader, by the end of the year, so we should see a 6th grader being in the 6.1 to 6.9 or even higher at this point in the school year. So this particular student is not exactly to that point yet, but they are pretty close. They in the second chart that you see over that says range of reading and level of text complexity. This is another thing that STAR does, to where it breaks down all of the skills that were tested on the STAR assessment and it kind of gives you a snapshot idea of where your students are. And so, as you can see, most of the skills the student was testing in a 6th grade level, which is great. So this is what we like to see. Students testing either on or above grade level, and this student is doing that exactly. So this speaks volumes for our reading staff in 6th grade. So continuing on, looking at our fall versus spring growth. So this first chart that I'm going to show you is our fall our fall results for this particular class in 6th grade. So as you can see, 32% of this class was at or above benchmark. There were 25 students in this class. Now let's look at the below benchmark area. So you have the blue, which is on watch, meaning that these students could go either way. They could go straight up into at or above benchmark, or they could go back down into intervention depending on the skills tested. So 9%, so 2 students are on watch in this particular class in the fall. 8 students, or 36%, were intervention. And then 5 students, or 23%, were urgent intervention. And so teachers can look at this data and they can be able to say, okay, so I can need to identify, because STAR will also identify these students, these 8 and these 5, and definitely go ahead and hunker down and get those skills in at the beginning of the year so they can continue to see growth throughout the school year. So how does it compare to our data in the spring? So this is our data in the spring. So this is the test that was given in April. So we have 24% were at or above benchmark. So if you go back really quickly to the previous one, so we have 1 student that has fallen into another category instead of at or above benchmark. This particular case, it could be anything from that student may have been absent and they needed to take the test and they needed to take it quickly because if they had to take it during the special as opposed to during the class time, there's not a lot of extra time having to take it during the specials. So it can be in any number of different things that could contribute to that 1 student moving away from benchmark at the end of the year. Now, if we look at the other 3 groupings on watch intervention and urgent intervention, we see that the numbers are pretty comparable. Students have moved in, they could have bumped down, they could have bumped up, all things can contribute to this particular score. But you can also see that we have 5 students that were on watch compared to the 2 students at the beginning of the year. So that means that we might have had some students move from intervention or urgent intervention into the on watch category, which is growth nonetheless. From the 8 students in intervention, you have 6. So again, they could have fluctuated either way. They could have gone up, they could have gone down. Either way, that number has changed. Lastly, from the 5 in urgent intervention, we did go up to 8. Like I said, with any test at the end of a school year, it's kind of difficult to get students to take this seriously. However, they do understand that it is important, but of course, kids are kids. So what does this mean? So looking at the fall to spring report, there is change. Students' scores could have fluctuated. Students could have moved from grouping to grouping throughout the school year, but we do see student growth. Even some of our students that fell into the intervention category showed growth. That example of the student that we had with the 3 yellow data points, that student showed trending upward growth. Of course, this year had some exceptionalities with everything going on. It is important to understand that our students have been resilient and they have persevered in a very strange school year. And so we are thankful and impressed by our students because of the fact that they have been able to overcome their difficulties, especially in this school year. It was expected to have lower starting data points this school year, like I said, with the abrupt ending of last school year and really not getting to finish the last 2 months and the already losing information throughout the summer. So we were expecting lower than normal numbers, but our students Most of our students didn't have unbelievably low numbers. They were starting in that intervention or on watch category. However, the data does suggest that our students showed growth in the face of adversity, which is a great thing for our students here at Albertville Intermediate School. Thank you so much for your time and consideration in this information that I have delivered to you today. And thank you very much for your attention.